Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone managed to get a quick cup of tea in between those two sessions. We've had some really important reflections during this morning, and we're now going to hear from the people at the heart of what we do, the very people for whom the services exist and we must always place at the heart of our work. At Cymorth, we've always been really keen to engage with people with lived experience. In a number of events, we've given people with lived experience a platform to share their views and experiences on what's gone well and what could be done better in the sector. And of course, a year ago, we held a series of Experts by Experience events so that they could contribute actively to the Homelessness Action Group recommendations. I'm delighted that as a result of that, the Homelessness Action recommendations and report was influenced by the views of people with lived experience, showing that it wasn't just a tokenistic exercise of asking them what they were looking for, but it really impacted on the recommendations that went to the Minister and the Minister accepted. Now, I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's taken part in this session. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of the organisations who engaged with us, who supported the people using their services to be interviewed for this session. A big shout out to Dalton, to Digatref, to Galady, Llamai and the Wallich for supporting the people that they support to engage in this session. We're now going to hear and watch a video of people's views on what could be done to end homelessness in Wales and their messages for the candidates standing in the Senedd election. Gwyn, please take it away with the video.
What is good about them is they've usually got an office which is staffed. So for people that are leaving prison and mental health hospitals and things like that, I mean, they aren't just put in a place where there's no help, none whatsoever. Because you know, it's one thing they've given you a roof over your head, yeah. But you know, the more important thing is to have the support there and the help there to get things like benefits up and running, healthcare, basically to help you with all your everyday things. Because a lot of people are finding themselves homeless is, you know, down to mental health problems, a lot of it, you know. So having in the project, having the support there and the help with all those things, you know, the projects wouldn't be as successful as they are without that, I don't think.
I think what's working well at the moment, I think there's a lot of support for people that experience homelessness. There's plenty of support services out there. I've worked for one of them myself. I went from living in a supported living project to then being a peer mentor, and then went to being a support worker in a supported living project as well. So I've had that journey right the way through. So I think there's a lot of support out there for people, and when people do need somewhere to stay, there's places like supported living projects for them.
Well, they always try to be very helpful and deal with any issues of the day. We get an evening meal, which is better than nothing, and the support workers always are very friendly. We have a designated support worker, and they sit down once a month with us and go through our action plans and to see how we're feeling and if there's any improvements to when we first moved here.
The individual staff as support workers, that's where the personal elements come in. Because I find a lot of the people in these organisations have like a personal interest in trying to help develop people or further them to get them in better. So I'd say it's a collective of individuals that actually have an interest. It seems like it's not just a job for them, they actually want to help people.
I think we need a few more hostels and a few more flats that people can move on, and then so that when they move on, the next people can come up, and then they can work, and maybe they can move on. I think that we all need more hostels to get people off the roads, off the streets, give everybody the same opportunity, and give them the same step up to help them towards a better future for them.
For me, I was a father when I experienced homelessness, and I think maybe there's a little bit less support for fathers out there, for single fathers, especially if the child, his main residence is with the mother. They seem to get a lot more support. So if I could change anything, it'd be to have more support out there for single dads.
What you got to realise is there's usually a horrific story behind that person's becoming homeless. It's usually a not nice story, and some going back to childhood, some from addiction problems and things like that, due to things that have happened in their childhood and all things like that. So trying to recognise and for people to become more open about these things and try and nip it in the bud early would be a good thing. And yeah, basically trying to look past and finding out the reason why they're homeless, if it's the mental health issues, get them that help. If it's addiction problems, refer them on to that.
They need a lot more housing stock for single people, and not just more housing stock, a better quality of stock. I know I've been to some places and they've been like slum landlord sort of thing, and people want to move on into decent accommodation so they feel comfortable where they live, they're happy where they live, and it just makes them feel better about themselves too.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the thing is, we deal with the problem now, and like just the people who are here now, but population levels in Swansea are rising. What they're going to do to not make sure there's not another lot of people experience the same thing, and there's places for them to go.
Yeah.
Especially one-bedroom properties. You need a continuous action plan that don't just stop after the reports and remits finish.
Maybe quick responses, because people are literally like their whole lives of like waiting on that decision to be made. So
there's not enough with the doctors. We don't get to see the doctors. The doctors' surgeries are closing, so we don't get to see the doctors enough, and consultants and dentists, the medical things as well. Because I haven't seen my consultant for over a year now for my arthritis and that. And so, medical and health, I think, is one of the most important.
Just taking people as face value, look, rather than just, oh yeah, he's so and so done, and then just chucking him in some bed sit or some, some actually, find out what's going wrong with that person first.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I've experienced problems with gambling, and that led some way to me experiencing problems with homelessness. And I think that's probably an addiction that's not as well understood throughout the support services. And it's probably somewhere where there's not as many support services. And I feel like if you experience problems with drugs or alcohol, there's a lot of support out there, but that probably could be increased for people who have problems with gambling, and I think it's unfortunately an issue that's becoming more prevalent as well at the moment.
Yeah, I think maybe it starts from in secondary schools, you know, when we have like the lessons about drugs or sex education. You could also have a lesson about homelessness, because I think most people, they just see a homeless person on the street and think they chose to be there, but they didn't choose to be there.
I'd like to see a program that, you know, just as these youngsters are about to go off on the wrong path, they could have a program set up where you've got all professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, you know, making notes and finding out why this child is troubled. You know, oh, this child is, and tapping into the reasons what's making them, just before you ruin their life and send them off to prison and send them off where then they've got no hope and they have to live in the same cycle. There should be a nationwide program that can help those youngsters that are slipping through the net, because at school they're not getting the you know, the one-on-one help. You know, I had ADHD, ADD when I was young, and you know, I didn't get the help. I was just told, go and sit in the corner, you know, I'm a destructive child. But really, I was very intelligent if you could tap into the things I enjoyed doing.
Because they, you know, they say that they listen to us, and they, you know, and we believe them, and they say, oh, we're going to get new hostels, we're going to do more houses, and then something else comes up then, and they don't. We need to be able to believe in what they say, and they've got to prove to us that they mean what they're going to say, that they, you know, if they're going to say, yes, we're going to give you new hostels, they're going to have to show us that they're going to do it and keep their word.
They need more people who's been here themselves to talk to you, rather than someone living in a posh house. Look, no, that's not going to work, because for 21 years I smoked heroin, right? Every support worker I had, drug key worker, didn't have no background, look. They had no background at all. So I was like, oh yeah, what do you know? But people need to listen to people who's been there themselves, you know? So actually try and get people who's covered from homeless and drug addict into helping the people who's come, you know?
I've read the report, and as I said, there seems to be the same stuff coming up for the last years. Well, we don't, the Welsh Assembly, but like the UK government, we've had two governments, different parties, and like I said, what they could do, first of all, homeless people need to be able to get on the electoral roll so they can cast their vote. And but there needs to be a cross-party solution found between them, and not looking to score political points. So they could engage with each other rather than think of the people rather than the headlines.
Quit now, you don't know what you're doing.
I live in the only LGBTQ plus project in Wales. Will the government make commitment to ensure that more projects are available for LGBTQ plus young people to access?
So people feel like that they're being ignored and pushed to one side, and that's a horrible thing. Like, so I think that the government need to actually start listening a little bit more to people and understanding how people are feeling out there, and understanding how to frighten, you know, the nights where you sleep outside and you're so scared that you can't sleep.
Homelessness seems to have risen a lot from when I was homeless before. There was a paper that said that there was only one person homeless on the streets of Swansea about 15 years ago. And looking at it today, there seem to be at least 100 people visibly homeless. And it seems to be a crisis out there at the moment in my eyes. And I want to know, what are they going to do to change the situation and help? As us move on, like end homelessness. What are they actually going to do instead of just saying it's time for action, not words?
Thank you very much. Some really powerful accounts, experiences and statements there from people with lived experience, and a huge thank you from everyone at Cymorth Cymru to people who agreed to be interviewed and shared their views on that video. I think there's a lot for us to take away from that. I think the importance of early intervention. A couple of people talked about what could be done better in education in schools to support people, to educate and inform people about homelessness at a young age. More housing was clearly a big call, but specifically better quality housing and one-bed properties that we know people need. Support on site was also raised as an important issue, so the continuation of supported accommodation where staff can be there readily available for people to talk to. Health support we know is a constant barrier faced by people, and we must do more and better in the future. We also heard about specific calls for supports for parents, in particular fathers who are experiencing homelessness, and another call for support around addiction to gambling. I think one of the most important things that came out was the importance of listening to people with experience of homelessness, to understanding the issues that they faced. Trauma came up, adverse childhood experiences, taking a trauma-informed approach, taking the time to understand the issues that have affected people and what they need to help them take steps towards their recovery and towards a sustainable tenancy. We also heard the importance of having more support workers with lived experience, people who can bring that empathy, that compassion and that experience with them to make a difference. And I'm sure that's something that lots of organisations are thinking about. And finally, the calls to the politicians. I think lots of those are quite clear. I think more needs to be done on housing and health and support and funding. But I think it was really great to hear that point, that this should be a cross-party issue, that people shouldn't be scoring political points off the back of homelessness, that there needs to be a consensus across parties in the Senedd to take forward the recommendations of the Homelessness Action Group and take us on that pathway to ending homelessness. And that politicians need to make real efforts to listen to people and to make sure that people with experience of homelessness don't feel ignored, that they're listened to and that action is taken. So thank you so much to all of our participants in that video, for Galady, Digatchef, Clwyd Allen, Llamai and the Wallich for supporting people to take part. It's really important that we listen to people with lived experiences and we make sure that the things that they say are present in the representations we make to government and on policy and strategy, as well as the sort of service delivery and transformation that you plan to do within your organisations. So moving on to our final session of our main conference programme, we're now going to talk about the Senedd elections and the opportunities that we have to influence those as we move forward. So Gwyn, if we could please see the presentation. So at Cymorth Cymru, we've been engaging with our members, with people with lived experience, with people involved in delivering services to talk about what might be the most important issues to be raised with candidates and political parties as we advance towards the Senedd elections in 7 weeks' time. Next slide, please, Gwyn. So today at this conference, we're launching our manifesto, a manifesto for ending homelessness. We know that the next Welsh Government has a huge opportunity to ensure that everyone in Wales has safe, secure and affordable home free from abuse. Incoming ministers have a huge chance to set Wales on a path to end homelessness and ensure that people have the support that they need to live independently in their own homes and thrive in their communities. As I've mentioned, we've done extensive engagement with our members through a series of regional meetings over the past 6 months, listened to them about what they thought the priorities should be for the next Welsh Government. And we've also built in the feedback from experts by experience. Next slide, please, Gwyn. Our first call will come as no surprise to the audience. It's implementation of the Homelessness Action Group recommendations. The group was established back in June 2019, which seems like a lifetime away now, but it came up with some really important recommendations about how we can make homelessness history in Wales. 3 reports were published, really comprehensive reports full of evidence, full of views from people on the front line, people with lived experience, and came up with a series of recommendations which have been accepted by the current minister. However, we don't know what the government will look like in a few months. We don't know what the ministers will be who fill those positions, and we're really clear that regardless of which party comes into power, they have to commit to full implementation of the Homelessness Action Group report. And I wanted to highlight 3 particular elements of that which we think are absolutely key. We've heard many times that homelessness is not just a housing issue, and we've heard from the experts by experience just now that the importance of health services and other services such as education and social services are equally as important in preventing homelessness and making sure that people have got the support that they need to exit homelessness. So we'll be looking for a cross-cabinet commitment to delivering the Homelessness Action Group recommendations for every directorate and department within the Welsh Government to commit to playing their part, and for them to use that leadership as ministers to get action taken across different sectors in Wales. We know that the transformation of homelessness services has begun with the phase 2 funding, but we've still got a long, long way to go if we want to move towards rapid rehousing and putting an end to the reliance that we have now on emergency accommodation. Making sure that people are able to move as quickly as possible into a settled home has to be at the forefront of our plans. We heard on day 1 of this conference the huge challenges that poses. It's certainly a massive ask, but the Welsh Government needs to provide that leadership, provide that support to local authorities and partners, and make sure the funding is in place, both capital and revenue, to make that happen. And we've heard lots throughout this conference about the importance of being trauma-informed and psychologically informed in our approaches. I think we've done lots of work in the housing and homelessness sector to take this issue forward, but there's still a lot more to do. There are organisations at different stages in implementation, but it's a continuous learning process, and we have to continue to keep our eye on that. But of course, we know that many of the people that we support in the homelessness and housing sector have interaction with lots of other public services. So it's not good enough to only look at the housing sector. We have to see a trauma-informed approach taken across all public sectors in Wales. We want to see the Welsh Government embed it across policy and strategy across the whole of Welsh Government, so that every public service in Wales is really clear that taking a trauma-informed and psychologically informed approach is absolutely critical to the future of Wales. Next slide, please, Gwyn. Our second call will come as no surprise to our members. It's something that we have been passionately campaigning on for over a decade, and it's about protecting and increasing the crucial funding that provides the services for people experiencing homelessness and trying to get towards independent living. We know that for many people, a roof over their head isn't good enough. We absolutely need more housing, but there has to be that support there to help people to deal with those adverse childhood experiences and the trauma associated with them, to support people to look after their mental health and to deal with any addiction issues that they're facing. We know that lots of people are coming from care experience background and need support with that transition, or lots of people facing domestic abuse, and we need to support survivors with that high quality support. We know that the Housing Support Grant is absolutely critical for this. It funds the vast majority of homelessness and housing support services in Wales, from supported accommodation for people with mental health problems, to domestic abuse refuges, to the floating support and housing first services that we see across Wales. We were delighted just a couple of months ago to be successful in our campaign for an increase in the Housing Support Grant for next year, and that means that we've got an extra £40 million added to that budget. But we can't stop there. We have to make sure that this funding is protected and increased during the next Senedd term. We can't stand still. We can't get complacent. We also know that maintaining the ring fence is really important. We know that there are too many examples of people opposing supported accommodation projects, opposing expenditure on homelessness services. Not in my backyard, they say. The ring fence is absolutely critical to making sure that we're able to direct this funding where it's needed and counteract any of that NIMBYism that occurs in our communities. We're really pleased to have published research a few months ago that shows the financial benefits of the Housing Support Grant. The Housing Support Grant services deliver £300 million gross annual savings to public services in Wales by preventing homelessness, easing pressure on health and social care, and reducing interaction with the criminal justice system. And that represents a net saving of £1.40 for every £1 invested by the Welsh Government. So it's clear to us that there is really good evidence for maintaining and increasing that spending, and it saves money for the government in the long term. Next slide, please. We've heard from many people throughout this conference the importance of building new homes, and importantly social homes. During this last Senedd term, there's been a focus on affordable homes, but we're really clear, along with many of our partner organisations, that the focus has to be on social homes. It has to be on those homes that people on the lowest incomes can't afford. So we're supporting the target that has been put out there by many organisations, including colleagues at Shelter Cymru, at Crisis and at Community Housing Cymru, for the Welsh Government to provide the funding and support to build 20,000 new social homes. But we know that affordability doesn't just come down to rent, it also comes down to paying for utilities. And, you know, not only reducing fuel poverty, but reducing the impact of the housing sector on climate change should be a priority for the next Welsh Government. So we're calling on the Welsh Government to provide that support for housing associations and local authorities to decarbonise existing stock and make sure that new builds are as energy efficient as possible. Next slide, please. We've heard this morning about the importance of homelessness, housing and support workers in Wales, how critical they've been during this pandemic. We know that they've always been our greatest asset, but the pandemic has shone a light on them, and I think there's much more awareness within society and across other departments within Welsh Government about the importance of their work. So now is the time to make sure that they are rewarded and recognised for that work. As we've heard earlier, we want the bare minimum to be the real living wage, but we want to recognise and reward people further. We want to make sure that the conditions that people are operating in are supportive, that people have access to reflective practice, that they feel valued. And that means that services have to be commissioned in a way that enables organisations to do that. So we're supporting the Pay Them Fairly campaign for improvement in pay and conditions in the social care workforce, but we're also continuing our calls on Welsh Government and local authorities to make sure that support workers through the Housing Support Grant get the pay and recognition that they deserve. Next slide, please, go in. And our fifth call is for improved access to mental health services. And this is something that came out really strongly in the engagement that we did with people using and delivering services. Access to mental health services is really difficult for too many people, but mental health is critical to people's ability to maintain tenancies and to break the cycle of trauma for future generations. When we talked to the sector, they didn't think there was one single ask that would deal with this. So we've come up with 3 individual points. Firstly, to improve access to NHS mental health services more generally. We know that waiting times are too long, that we don't have enough resource in the system to meet the needs of the general population, and that too often it's people with experience of homelessness who get left behind. Secondly, we want to see the expansion of multidisciplinary homelessness teams. We've seen some teams exist for a number of years now, and particularly with the phase 2 funding, we've seen more and more posts that specialise in mental health and substance use being added to homelessness teams. That's a really great way of getting that specialist expertise in mental health and substance misuse out to people where they are, whether that's sleeping rough on the streets or whether that's in emergency accommodation or supported accommodation. And we have to continue to invest in that in an integrated way, working in partnership between homelessness, mental health and substance use teams. And finally, we need to continue to fund the specialist mental health housing support services. We know that there's been a move over the decade of austerity to more generic, bigger contracts. And while those can have positive impacts, we need to maintain that specialism so that we have the right skills and the right expertise in our sector to support people with the more severe mental health problems. So that's our 5 asks. Next slide, please, Gwyn. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to the formulation of that manifesto. I hope that those of you who are involved in the conversations can see the things that you raised reflected in this manifesto. We'll be getting in touch with the political parties and making sure they're aware of the calls within this. We've been having conversations with many of them for many months now, informally, and they're clear on what we're asking. But this document formalises those things into an easy and accessible way of communicating those priorities. What we're asking on you is to use your voice over the next 7 weeks. You're all constituents within your constituencies and regional areas, you will elect a constituency member of the Senedd, you will elect 4 regional members of the Senedd. So please engage in this campaign, contact your local candidates, share this document with them, make sure they're aware of our asks. We'll be putting out the link to our members and on social media in the very near future. Make your voice heard on social media, tag your local candidates and ask them to support the manifesto action. Share the link to the manifesto and ask them to let you know if they're supporting it. Attend online hustling events and ask questions of candidates. There'll be lots of those happening over the coming weeks, so make sure that you're there and present, making your voice heard. And you can also organise your own digital meetings with local candidates within your projects, inviting people with lived experience of homelessness and housing support to join those meetings, to meet their candidates and to ask some of those really important questions that we saw reflected in the Experts by Experience session. So that's our manifesto. We hope that you will support it over the coming weeks, and we hope that political parties and candidates choose to reflect some of these things in the promises that they make to the electorate as they ask for people's votes. I want to remind you that we've got another frontline free session that starts at 1 p.m. today, and please join Mandy and Tanya from Cymorth for that session where you can find out a bit more about the Senedd elections and about how you can make your voice heard and make a real impact on the policy and funding and strategy that gets set for Wales. I'm going to close the formal part of our conference though now. I first of all want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, to Clwyd Allen and Digital Communities Wales, who've been our main conference sponsors this year, but also to our day sponsors, to the National Lottery Community Fund, to Cadwyn Housing Association, to Mirus and the United Welsh Group. We couldn't have put on the conference without your support and we're incredibly grateful. I want to thank all of our speakers who've been fantastic. Many have shared huge amounts of expertise and experience. Pay particular tribute to those who shared their own personal experiences, particularly in the Experts by Experience session and the Challenging Racism session earlier today. We hope that we've put on a good programme for you. We hope that you've enjoyed it. We hope that you've learned from it. And we hope that you go away committing to take action on some of the issues that you've heard today. I'd like to thank all of our attendees. Without you, it would just be me standing here speaking to no one. So I'm grateful that some of you turned up to listen. I'd like to say thank you to the people with lived experience. I think they're always at the centre of our thoughts at Cymorth, and it's really great that they took part today. And before we finish, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the Cymorth team. It may be me that stands up here and does the talking, but I couldn't do this without an incredible team behind me. And they've worked so hard over the past few weeks to put this event together. It's our first ever online conference and we're all really nervous about it, but I think they've done a really great job. I want to pay particular tribute to Gareth, Mandy and Tanya, who have been presenting their own sessions or will present their own session next. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Gwyn and to Tanya for engaging with people with lived experiences, for doing those interviews with such compassion and understanding, and making sure that people were able to have their voices heard. I want to say a big thank you to Tanya, who's been tweeting away on social media, making sure that the views and experiences of our speakers reach beyond our audience and to the people who weren't able to attend over the past 3 days. And finally, I'd just like to say an enormous thank you to Gwyn. He's our events and marketing lead. He's been the brains behind this. He's put all of this conference together, has been the person that's been in the background, making sure that all of these sessions are able to run, making sure that speakers are prepared and feel supported. And we couldn't have done this without you, Gwyn. So a huge thank you for everything that you've done in the last few weeks and especially over the last few days. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our conference. I hope that you've enjoyed it and learnt lots after a really challenging year, and I hope that you feel valued, because I'm incredibly proud and privileged to represent this sector. We've seen the very best of this sector over the last year. You've undoubtedly saved many lives, and I couldn't be prouder to work for Cymorth Cymru and to have the privilege of representing you to the government in Wales. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the week, and I hope you get some time off in the near future after a really challenging year. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much all, and see you soon.